Hey guys, tonight we slowly drift into one of the most extraordinary rescue stories ever lived, one where a single decision, taken far from home and buried in a world of ice, determined whether 27 men would live or die. You ease into this moment, not by rushing toward the danger, but by letting it approach you quietly, like the slow tightening of a frozen sea. A sea that once trapped a ship whose fate seemed sealed long before hope arrived. You find yourself standing at the edge of the story of Ernest Shackleton's endurance expedition, noticing the small human details that rarely make it into textbooks, the warmth of breath in cold air, the scratch of wool against your skin, the faint tremor of wood beneath your boots. As you trace these threads, you begin to sense why a modern person might struggle to experience this world firsthand. Not because it's frightening, but because it unfolds at a rhythm we rarely touch anymore. Slow, relentless, intimate, and stubborn in a way that only survival can be. Before we begin, I'd love it if you could share in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always comforting to see our little nighttime map quietly glowing from all around the world. And if calm, practical history helps you unwind, a subscribe and like genuinely helps more people find this. Now, take a breath. Let your shoulders drop. Imagine the air cooling around you until it feels like dawn 2,000 years ago. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes into a gentle gray morning at the southern edge of civilization. The wooden planks beneath your feet hum softly with the rhythm of a living ship. This is the Endurance, Shackleton's proud vessel, still young in her journey and unscarred by the trials to come. You stand among crates and coils of rope, bundled in heavy wool, feeling the cool Antarctic wind reach across the deck like an unexpected hand. There is no hint yet of the danger ahead, no sign that this ship will one day be crushed until her bones crack like timber in a storm. No whisper that you, alone with the others, will survive because of a chain of choices not yet made. Instead, the deck feels alive beneath you, gently shifting as the ship pushes farther into the icy waters of the Weddell Sea. Around you, men laugh softly, adjusting gloves and tightening scarves. Their voices drift lightly between the masts, blending into the creak of rigging and the distant cry of seabirds that still circle overhead. You move toward the rail, letting your gloved fingers brush the frost-coated wood. The sea stretches outward in a muted sheet of steel blue, flecked with early pieces of drift ice. Small floes tap gently against the hull, like polite introductions before the conversation turns serious. Behind you, Shackleton steps onto the deck. His presence is not loud, not dramatic, but unmistakably steady. He carries warmth the way others carry tools or supplies, a quiet magnetic heat that pulls men toward him. His boots leave crisp impressions in the thin layer of snow as he joins you at the rail. He studies the horizon with eyes that always seem to be calculating some invisible equation. He doesn't know yet that he will save every man on this journey, but he already carries the calm of someone who might. You feel the drift? Worsley's voice calls from behind you, light but observant. Ice is thickening earlier than expected. Shackleton only nods. The Weddell Sea has a mind of its own. He says it casually, but you sense something beneath the words, a flicker of respect for a landscape few ever see, and fewer still survive. The men believe they will cross the continent. Shackleton believes they will too. But the sea? The sea seems to have another plan forming quietly under the surface. The ship pushes forward. Ice thickens around her. The air grows sharper, cleaner, almost brittle in its clarity. You descend to the lower deck, where dogs bark cheerfully, their breath rising in ethereal puffs. They stamp their paws on the planks, eager for attention, eager for the frozen world ahead. You kneel beside one, a broad-chested creature with intelligent eyes, and feel the warmth beneath its fur, such a contrast to the world waiting outside. One of the handlers, Blackbro, smiles as he brushes snow from a dog's coat. "Hard to believe they'll be our lifeline later, eh?" he says casually. You don't understand the weight of that remark yet. Not fully. But the story you're stepping into will teach you soon. Above, lunch bells ring. You join the men in the mess cabin, where warm broth steams in tin cups and laughter floats between wooden beams. Someone tells a joke. Someone else pretends to complain about the cold. You watch the faces around you, healthy, hopeful, unaware of the months ahead where frostbite, hunger, drifting ice, and unimaginable cold will test every part of them. For now, they are warm. For now, the ship holds strong. When you return to the deck, the world has changed again. Ice floes press closer, forming shifting tiles on an endless white mosaic. They bump lightly against the hull, then slide away, replaced by others in a slow dance of frozen geometry. You watch one floe crack down its center, revealing a deep blue glow like trapped ancient light. Shackleton watches too. "Pressure ice," he murmurs. "The sea is sending us her first warning. A warning, but not yet a threat." The day stretches on. You help haul supplies, adjust rigging, and assist the carpenter with small tasks. Each action keeps you warm, your body moving in rhythm with the ship. You step carefully across frost-slit planks, balancing against the slight roll. Overhead, the sun arcs in a path that feels quieter, lower than it does anywhere else on Earth. Evening comes slowly, with muted colors spreading across the sky like watercolors fading into one another. The crew gathers on deck to watch the last smudge of sunlight melt into the horizon. Dogs curl into furry circles. Lanterns flicker to life along the rail, their warm glow pushing back the growing cold. As the sky deepens into twilight, Shackleton stands at the bow. You join him, sensing that this moment will matter in some way you cannot yet explain. "The ice will challenge us," he says softly. "But remember, whatever comes, we face it as one. It is not a dramatic speech. It is not made for effect. It is simply true. You feel the truth settle inside you, warm and steady. Because this is the beginning of a story that will be told for more than a century, not because of the tragedy, but because of the rescue. Because of the leader who refused to lose a single life in a world where nature took everything else." Night drapes itself across the ship. The wind softens. The ice whispers against the hull. You step away from the bow and head toward your bunk, letting the gentle motion of the ship carry you inward. Tomorrow, the sea will tighten its grip. Tomorrow, the ice will grow bolder. Tomorrow, the journey toward survival truly begins. For now, you lie down in your narrow bunk, listening to the heartbeat of the ship beneath you. A steady, reassuring rhythm in the cold dark. The Endurance breathes. You breathe with her, and the story moves one quiet step closer to the moment where everything changes. The next morning arrives with a kind of muted brightness that barely touches the horizon. You wake to the soft groan of timbers and the subtle shift of weight that tells you the Endurance is pushing through thicker ice than the day before. For a moment, lying in your bunk, you cannot tell if the sound is inside the hull or inside your own chest. The cold has crept deeper overnight, settling into corners and seams, claiming space the way the ice outside is slowly beginning to claim the sea. You rise, pulling your heavy wool layers close, feeling the stiffness of fabric that froze slightly during the night. When you step onto the deck, the world that meets you feels sharper than yesterday, brighter in some places, darker in others, and edged in a crispness that seems to hum quietly in the air. The ice is closer now. Where yesterday you saw scattered floes drifting lazily on the water, today those floes touch one another gently, like acquaintances greeting for the first time. They slide together with the ease of puzzle pieces, returning to their natural order. Large pans, white as bleached bone, press softly against the sides of the ship with small taps that vibrate up through the hull. You feel it through your boots. A subtle vibration, like a heartbeat you're just beginning to notice. Shackleton is already on deck. He stands near the forward rail, coat collar turned up, face calm but intent. His eyes follow the shifting mosaic of ice, studying the shapes, distances, and movements as if reading a language written in frozen geometry. Worsley joins him with a sextant under his arm, still wiping sleep from his eyes. "More drift in the night," he says. "Faster than expected. Wind pushed from the south." Shackleton nods slowly. "She's funneling us toward thicker pack." He says it gently, not as a warning, but as an observation. Soft and matter-of-fact, though. You can feel the weight beneath the words. Around you, men begin their morning routines. Hands pull ropes taut, adjust sails, check fittings. The carpenter, McNish, runs his palm along a rail, feeling for frost he can chip away before the ship starts a new day's work. Blackborough tends to the dogs, feeding them biscuits as they yelp and paw excitedly at the snow. Their breath clouds into small silver ghosts around them. You step to the rail and look outward. The ice stretches farther now, forming fields of white broken by channels of dark water. The floes are thicker, heavier, and the movement of the ship has slowed. You can feel it in the way she pushes forward, not gliding anymore, but nudging, easing, persuading the ice to open before her. It still does, but less willingly. For a moment, the entire landscape seems to inhale. The wind softens. The dogs quiet. The men pause. A floe the size of a house bumps the hull with a deep, resonant thud. It's not a threatening sound, not yet, but it is a reminder. The kind of reminder that lingers. At breakfast, the mess cabin glows with lantern light, casting warm, trembling halos across the wooden walls. Men crowd the benches, warming hands around tin mugs filled with steaming porridge and strong tea. The stove radiates a comforting heat, crackling softly. You sit beside two sailors discussing the cold. "Haven't seen it thicken this early," one murmurs. "Just a bit of brash ice," the other says, trying to sound confident. But you can feel their unease, even if it slips out, only in the way their eyes flick toward the frosted portholes. After breakfast, Shackleton gathers a small group on deck. "We press on," he says quietly. The continent's waiting. No one doubts him. No one questions him. His certainty is a kind of warmth all its own. The Endurance moves forward as men lean into their tasks. You feel the ship strain gently against the growing resistance. Ice shuffles aside, groaning softly. The bow cuts a narrow passage, leaving thin trails of broken ice behind her. The dogs bark occasionally at the cracks forming and resealing as the floes shift under pressure. As the morning unfolds, the ice thickens further. Small floes become large ones. Large ones become barriers. The open water narrows into winding, irregular lanes like frozen rivers. The ship follows these lanes carefully under Worsley's command, weaving between patches of dense pack with a quiet, persistent determination. And midway through the afternoon, the world stills. Wind dies entirely. The water beneath the floes stops shifting. The floes themselves settle into perfect alignment, touching edge to edge in a single spreading sheet. The men notice instantly. You hear one whisper, "She's closing." The Endurance presses forward, but the ice grows stubborn. A dull grinding sound rumbles along the hull. The bow nudges into a floe, hesitates, and the ship slows to nearly nothing. Worsley calls down from the bridge. "She isn't taking the water, sir. It's freezing as fast as we break it." Shackleton steps forward, eyes scanning. You see calculation, patience, and that unshakable quiet resolve. "We wait," he says softly. "The sea will move again." And so the men wait. Some return to duties. Some tend to dogs. Some walk the deck in slow, thoughtful strides. You stay near the rail, watching tiny cracks radiate outward from the ship's edges as the ice locks around her. The sun begins its slow arc downward, tinting the world in pale gold and silver. Snowflakes drift lazily from a cloud bank, settling on ropes and sleeves, clinging to eyelashes before melting. The Endurance no longer moves forward. She floats, enclosed, held in place by a frozen cradle that seems gentle now, but will not stay gentle for long. As evening stretches across the sky, temperature drops sharply. The ice surrounding the ship hardens, thickens, solidifies into a surface you could walk across. You test it with a gloved hand over the rail, your fingers brushing a smooth, glassy sheet that wasn't there this morning. The men gather near the bow, talking in low voices. "She's tight," someone says. "Temporary," another mutters. But everyone can feel it. The stillness, the way the ice holds the hull, the subtle pressure beginning to whisper beneath the quiet. Shackleton walks among the crew with a gentle steadiness. He stops to speak with each man, nothing dramatic. Just a word here, a question there, a reminder that they are a unit. A single body, a family forged on ice. As you stand beside him, he glances toward the horizon, where faint violet light fades into deep blue. "The trouble isn't the ice stopping us," he says softly. "It's what it does when it begins to move again." There is no fear in his tone, no urgency, only understanding. You look out at the frozen plain. It stretches infinitely, a silent kingdom of snow and frost. The floes seem harmless, flat, bright, gently resting. But somewhere beneath that calm surface, forces stir. The pack ice is not static. It shifts with tides, with wind, with unseen pressures that build and release without warning. For now, you feel none of that. Only the gentle hush of winter evening settling around you like a blanket. Later, after dinner, you climb the ladder to the deck once more. Night has deepened into a quiet that feels ancient. The ship, locked in the ice, lies perfectly still, no sway, no roll, just the faint creaking of timbers adjusting to the cold. You step onto the floe. Underfoot, the ice is solid, smooth, almost inviting. Lantern light spills across its surface, making it shimmer like polished stone. You walk a short distance, listening to the soft crunch of snow beneath your boots. Behind you, the Endurance rises proudly out of the frozen plain, masts silhouetted against a star-streaked sky. You breathe in, letting the cold settle inside your lungs, crisp and clean. The silence is profound, the stillness absolute. Yet deep beneath that stillness lies the beginning of a story of pressure and endurance, one that will force the ship toward her fate, one that will push the men toward their greatest test, one that will ultimately lead to one of the most miraculous rescues in history. You turn back toward the ship, feeling the first small thread of tension beneath the calm. The ice has accepted the Endurance into its grip. Soon, it will test her strength, and soon after, it will test yours. But for now, the world is quiet. The stars glow softly above. The lanterns flicker in the cold air. You climb back aboard, step into your bunk, and feel the warmth of wool settle around you. Tomorrow, the ice will speak louder. Tomorrow, the journey toward rescue will begin its slow, relentless pull. Tonight, you rest. Tonight, the ship sleeps in the cradle of the Weddell-sea, unaware of the trials that await but held, for now, in a quiet that feels almost gentle. You wake to a silence that feels thicker than the cold itself. It settles over the Endurance like a soft, heavy blanket, muffling even the smallest sounds. For a moment, lying in the dimness of your bunk, you have the sense that the ship is holding her breath. You feel it in the stillness of the boards beneath you, in the way the air hangs without movement, in the faint tension humming somewhere deep in the hull. The ice has tightened during the night. You sense it before your boots even touch the floor. When you climb the ladder to the deck, the world that greets you feels transformed. The floes that were gently touching yesterday now lie fused together in a broad, unbroken sheet stretching endlessly toward the horizon. The dark ribbons of water between them have vanished, sealed overnight by the deepening cold. Snow has dusted everything: rails, ropes, barrels, dog pens, with a soft, crystalline layer that sparkles faintly under the pale morning light. The Endurance sits held embedded in a frozen sea that no longer shifts or drifts, but grips. Shackleton and Worsley stand near the bow. Their voices are low, their breath rising in thin clouds that linger in the still morning air. You approach quietly, boots crunching in the fine crust of frost covering the deck. Worsley gestures with one gloved hand toward the endless white. It's a firm freeze. No leads anywhere I can see. Shackleton nods, eyes thoughtful. The pack means to keep us a while. He says it without frustration, without anger, just a calm, steady acceptance of the ice's intentions. The men gather around them, forming a loose semicircle. No one looks frightened, but the stillness of the morning weighs heavily on everyone. The ship feels anchored, not by ropes or moorings, but by the invisible force of the ice. Routine continues anyway. It must. After breakfast, assignments are given. Some men work to chip frost from the deck. Others tend to the dogs, whose paws stamp eagerly against the snow. Their lively movement breaks the hush, their playful barks echoing faintly across the frozen plain. You join a group tasked with clearing accumulated ice from the rails. As you work, you steal occasional glances outward. The landscape is mesmerizing, flat, shimmering, quiet. Nothing moves. No birds call. No waves lap against the hull. Even the wind seems to hesitate. It is beautiful in a way that feels dangerous. By midday, the sun hangs low, casting a pale sheen across the endless white. The air is so cold it almost rings, each breath forming a small cloud that lingers near your face before dissolving. You take a moment to test the ice with the tip of your boot over the rail. It is solid hard as stone. Shackleton calls for dogs and sledges. "We stretch our legs," he says simply. The men welcome the chance to step onto the ice. You descend the rope ladder and feel your boots sink slightly into the powdery snow. The ice beneath is smooth and firm. The dogs bound forward, pulling against their traces with exuberance. Their paws leave crisp patterns across the surface. You walk a few paces away from the ship. From the ice, the Endurance looks both mighty and fragile, her dark hull rising from the frozen sea like a monument. She seems almost peaceful in her captivity, but you sense something underneath that peace. A tension, a quiet resistance. Far in the distance, a faint boom rolls across the ice, so deep it is more felt than heard. The men pause, listening. Then another rumble, closer this time. The sound vibrates through your boots, through the flow, through your bones. Pressure. Worsley squints at the horizon. She's moving somewhere out there. Shackleton nods, but doesn't rush the men. He simply calls for everyone to return to the ship. There is no fear, only preparation. He believes in readiness. He believes in calm. And you begin to understand why his men will one day trust him with their lives. Back aboard, the afternoon light begins to fade. The temperature drops further. Frost thickens on the lines and gathers like feathers along the edges of the deck. The dogs curl into tight, warm circles. The men retreat inside, rubbing their hands near the stove, trading soft remarks about the strange quiet of the day. As evening settles, you step back outside. The ship no longer feels just still, she feels held. You sense it in the faint, almost imperceptible hum of wood under strain, in the subtle give of the hull when you press your gloved hand to it. The ice is not crushing her. Not yet, but it is asserting itself, reminding the ship that she no longer moves of her own will. You walk slowly along the tilted deck, listening to the faint creak of timber, the soft crackle of frost underfoot. A thin wind stirs at last, brushing against your coat with a whisper that sends small, swirling flurries of snow drifting across the rails. You pause near the bow. Shackleton stands there again, hands tucked into his sleeves, eyes fixed on the horizon. He does not speak for a long moment. When he finally does, his voice is low, almost contemplative. The ice is studying us. You feel the truth of it. The ice has its own rhythm, its own timing. It is patient. It is ancient. It is waiting for something for the moment when pressure, drift, and temperature align. But Shackleton is waiting too, watching, learning, preparing. Night falls gradually. Lanterns glow along the deck, their warm halos pushing back the shadows. The ice reflects that light, shimmering faintly. The entire world feels suspended between breaths. You descend to your bunk with the sense that something is beginning, a slow unwinding of events that will carry you far from this moment. The journey ahead will test every man aboard, bending strength, pushing limits, but not breaking them. Not under Shackleton's leadership. As you settle into your blankets, the hull gives a soft groan, a tired exhale that vibrates through the wooden frame. It is not a warning. Not yet. Just the voice of a ship learning how to sleep inside the frozen world that holds her. You close your eyes, letting the rhythm of that quiet creaking carry you toward rest. Tomorrow, the ice will tighten. Tomorrow, the pressure will whisper a little louder. Tomorrow, the long trail toward rescue will draw a little nearer. For now, you sleep within the stillness, held like the ship in the calm before the first true test begins. Morning arrives not as a gentle light, but as a slow, creeping grayness that seems to seep into the ship from every direction. You wake with the sensation that the air around you has grown denser during the night, as though even the cold has weight now. The timbers beneath your bunk feel stiffer, more brittle, responding to the tightening ice with faint pops and soft, irregular groans. You rise carefully, listening to the muted world around you, sensing that the Endurance has settled deeper into her frozen cradle. When you step onto the deck, the transformation is unmistakable. The ice has grown into a solid, glittering plain that stretches in every direction. No cracks of dark water, no moving flows, no shifting channels. Just one vast, unbroken sheet of white, touched by the faint blush of the early sun. The Endurance sits motionless within it, her hull gripping the ice, or perhaps being gripped by it, the line between the two blurred now. Shackleton stands near the stern, breath curling upward in pale ribbons. He watches the horizon with a quiet vigilance, hands clasped loosely behind his back. His coat is rimed with frost, and his boots crunch softly as he shifts his weight. Worsley joins him, offering drift readings and notes on the wind. You catch fragments of their conversation as you approach. "Shifted another mile north in the night," Worsley murmurs. Shackleton nods thoughtfully. "The pack is moving under us. Even if we can't see it, those words linger with you. The world may look frozen and still, but beneath the surface, unseen forces are at work. Currents, pressure zones, distant storms pushing and pulling these massive sheets of ice, the way invisible tides tug at continents. The ship is not resting in silence. She is drifting upon a sleeping giant. The crew gathers on deck to begin the morning's tasks. Snow is cleared. Lines are checked. Frost is chipped from the rails. The dogs howl eagerly as Joyce and Wild attempt to quiet them enough for feeding. Their energy seems to defy the cold. They stamp their paws and leap against the snow, creating bursts of fine white powder that sparkle in the crisp air. You join a team tasked with clearing the ice buildup along the starboard rail. As you scrape and hammer away the hardened frost, you feel the ship respond, not dramatically, but subtly. There is a faint quiver beneath your boots, like a deep muscle twitch beneath layers of wood and iron. Someone nearby pauses and presses a gloved hand to the rail. You feel that? Another nods. Pressure somewhere. Not here yet? That word again, pressure. You've begun to understand it in a way that textbooks never truly convey. Pressure is not just force. It is intent. It is movement without visible motion. It is the whisper of destruction before the sound of it arrives. By midday, The sky softens into a luminous pale blue, the sun hanging low like a distant lantern. The temperature rises just enough for a faint sheen of frost to thaw from your sleeves before instantly refreezing. You take a moment to gaze outward, letting the immensity of the ice settle into your vision. It is breathtaking, but also unsettling. There is no edge, no boundary, no visible end, just an infinite white stage upon which the story of the ship will play out. Shackleton orders an exercise run for the dogs, partly for their health, partly to maintain routine, and partly to draw the crew's minds away from the unsettling stillness. You join them onto the ice, feeling the flow firm beneath your feet. The dogs surge forward, eager and wild, their paws cutting patterns into the powder. They bark joyfully, unaware of the tension gathering around them. You walk farther than yesterday. When you turn back, the Endurance looks even more like a stranded monument, masts rising tall, hull dark against the ready-made landscape of ice. She seems at once powerful and fragile, like a creature out of place in a world that does not recognize her purpose. Far to the south, you hear a distant reverberation, an unmistakable resonant crack. The sound travels across the ice in a low, rolling wave. The men fall still. Even the dogs pause, tails up, ears pricked. Worsley shades his eyes with one gloved hand. Pressure ridge forming out there. Another crack closer this time. Shackleton gestures calmly. Back to the ship, lads. There is no panic in his voice, only steady direction. You follow the men back up the rope ladder, the ice shifting in small, nearly imperceptible ways beneath your feet. As soon as you step aboard, the hull gives off a faint groan, less a warning, more an acknowledgement of what's building beneath the ice. Inside the ship, warmth radiates from the stove in the mess cabin. The scent of stew floats through the air, simple, hearty, necessary. Men remove their gloves, warming stiff fingers near the fire. The room glows with lantern light, shadows shifting across wooden beams. Conversation is quiet but steady. Someone mentions hearing deep booms during the night. Another speaks of the dreamlike quality of the stillness. Someone jokes weakly that the ice is giving the ship a hug she didn't ask for. Laughter follows, soft, thin, but welcome. Shackleton appears briefly, offering a few words of reassurance. The pack is restless, he says, but not dangerous. When the time comes, we'll act. For now, we keep routine. Routine. It is the lifeline that keeps fear at bay. Later, you head back onto the deck alone. The afternoon light has begun to dim, dissolving into soft shades of lavender and pale gold on the horizon. The temperature drops with the fading sun, and a delicate crust of ice forms on any surface your breath touches. Then, quietly, the ice speaks. It starts as a faint tremor, so faint you might think it is your imagination. But the tremor grows into a thin cracking sound that ripples beneath the ship. A narrow fissure shoots across the floe, moving so fast it looks like a line being drawn under the ice by an unseen hand. You watch it travel outward, then split into branching paths that stretch toward the horizon. The ship responds with a soft moan, a shifting of weight, a faint, cautious adjustment. Not danger yet, but intention. The ice is waking. Shackleton appears beside you, his gaze tracking the fissures. Pack's loosening a touch, he murmurs. Could be a shift coming. You feel a strange blend of relief and unease. Movement means the sea hasn't abandoned you. But movement also means pressure ice grinding ice, forces gathering in places you cannot see. As evening descends fully, the ice hardens again. The cracks freeze over, forming delicate crystal patterns that shimmer under the lanterns. The wind picks up slightly, brushing snowflakes across the deck in silent, drifting trails. You head below for the night. The hull creaks softly as you descend the ladder. In the dim glow of your lantern, the narrow passageways feel warmer than the endless ice outside. You slide into your bunk, pulling blankets close around you, listening as the ship settles into the night. Somewhere far below, the timbers shift just a little. A small warning, a gentle reminder. The pack ice is not done tightening its hold. Its strength is gathering. Its patience is endless. You close your eyes, knowing the days ahead will change the story of the Endurance. Each night will carry new sounds, new strains, new signs of what the ice intends. But you also know this. Whatever comes, Shackleton will answer it. Whatever the ice takes, he will preserve what matters most. Rescue is not yet visible, but its roots are being planted here, in the quiet before anything breaks. You sink deeper into your blankets, letting your breath slow to match the creaking lull of the ship. Outside, the ice whispers against the hull, waiting for the next moment to reveal its strength. For now, you drift into sleep, held by the ship, held by the cold, held by the fragile calm that will not last. You wake before the call comes, stirred by a sound that is neither familiar nor alarming, just different. A long, low, wavering moan travels through the hull, not sharp enough to be danger, but not soft enough to ignore. It feels almost like the ship is dreaming beneath you, shifting in her sleep, responding to distant forces working their way toward her. When you climb out of your bunk, the cold grips your skin through the wool, tightening around your face the moment your breath escapes. The air feels heavier today, more saturated with frost, more expectant somehow. You climb the ladder to the deck, one hand on the railing, your boots slipping slightly on rime that has formed overnight. The world that greets you is nothing short of ghost-like. The ice has stiffened into a pale, white desert that gleams faintly under the early morning haze. Flat, silent, utterly unmoving. But there is something new, small ridges pushing upward near the starboard side, like frozen waves rising toward the hull. They were not there yesterday. Shackleton stands near them. He does not speak at first. His gloved hand brushes along a ridge's sharp, crystalline edge. It sparkles faintly, cutting shadows in delicate patterns across his sleeve. He turns slightly as you approach. "It's begun," he says softly. You glance at the ridge again. It's not large, only a foot high, but its presence is unmistakable. The ice is shifting, slowly, quietly, but deliberately. Worsley walks up beside you, rubbing frost from his beard. "Pressure started around 3, he says. "Heard the floes grinding under us." Shackleton nods. "The sea is stirring below. Breakfast is quiet." The men eat with a subdued attentiveness, listening between bites for the sounds of the hull adjusting. Some try to joke. Others stare at their mugs as though reading the faint wisps of steam rising from them. The stove crackles comfortingly, filling the air with warmth that feels almost borrowed from another world. Afterward, tasks continue as always. Routine is the crew's anchor. You join a group, checking the hull from the ice. Stepping down the rope ladder, you feel the rigidity of the floe firmer than before, almost glassy underfoot. You walk cautiously around the stern, boots crunching softly, each step a reminder of the strange, immense power sleeping beneath the surface. The hull leans slightly, barely noticeable yesterday, now obvious the moment you look for it. A faint angle, as though the ship has shifted 1 degree toward port. McNish, the carpenter, kneels beside the hull, tapping with the back of his gloved knuckles. He listens, taps again, listens longer. "She's sound," he says at last. "But she's feeling it. The words settle deep within you. As the dogs run beside the sledges later in the morning, you walk farther out from the ship. The floe groans occasionally, a sound rolling beneath your feet like a sigh. A faint crack forms parallel to your path, racing across the surface with startling speed before freezing instantly, forming lace-like patterns beneath your boots. Pressure fissure. Someone mutters behind you, but you already know. The ice is tightening. You return to the ship from midday rations. Tea warms your throat, though your fingers feel stiff from the cold. The ship creaks from time to time, not the comforting creak of a vessel riding swell, but the slow, shifting groan of timber, resisting forces that have not yet fully declared themselves. After lunch, Shackleton gathers a small group by the rail. He does not give a speech. He does not raise his voice. He simply speaks as though telling you the weather. "We prepare for the pack to move," he says. "Nothing dangerous yet, but pressure may increase today. Stay aware." The men nod. No dramatics, no fear, just readiness. You spend the afternoon helping strengthen lashed equipment, securing barrels, tightening lines. Each time you pause, you hear something subtle a crack beneath the ice, a resonant hum in the hull, a faint tremor that travels upward through your boots into your spine. Once, near the bow, you feel the ice shift almost imperceptibly. The motion is so slight, you wonder if you imagined it. Until the dogs all stop barking at the same instant, ears perked, bodies rigid. Animals understand before humans do. As the sun arcs lower, the light becomes a soft peach color, casting long, thin shadows across the frozen plain. The ridges have grown taller 2 feet now, some even 3 forming jagged lines along the starboard side where the ice has buckled upward. They gleam like fractured glass beneath the fading light. The tension in the air feels almost electric. Tonight, something will change. You can feel it. Everyone can. During dinner, men speak in hushed tones. A few describe strange vibrations felt through the deck. One swears he heard a deep groan under the bow, like the ground shifting in its sleep. Another mentions the tilt has worsened. A degree, maybe 2. Shackleton listens, not with concern, but with attention. He stores every detail. He reads the ice the way others read the sea. When he finally speaks, his words are calm. "We stay ready. That's all." Afterward, you pull on your outer layers and return to the deck for the evening watch. The world outside has changed again, just in the time it took for supper to pass. The temperature has dropped dramatically. The air bites at your cheeks. Your breath escapes in long, white trails that hover before fading into the darkness. The ridges cast sharper shadows now, rising like jagged sculptures carved by giants. The ice surface has grown more uneven, fractured in places that were smooth only hours before. You kneel near one crack and watch as tiny crystals form along its edge, the whole fissure freezing faster than your eyes can follow. The ship groans softly. You stand. The sound deepens. Another groan lower vibrates through the deck beneath your boots. A moment later, the ice answers with a muffled thud that echoes up the hull. Pressure. Real pressure. You grip the rail. Far to the west, a line of darkness moves slowly, subtly. At first you think it's cloud cover. Then you realize it's the ice itself, shifting in a single massive sheet. The movement is hypnotic, silent, immense. You hear distant cracking, then a closer crack, then a low boom. Worsley appears beside you. The pack's tightening fast. Shackleton steps onto the deck moments later, his eyes sweeping across the shifting landscape. He closes his hand around the rail, listening to the ship through the cold metal. "Hold steady," he murmurs, though perhaps not to the men, but to the vessel herself. The ship tilts slightly more. Not a lurch, not a jolt. A yielding. Inside the hull, a beam pops with a sharp, resonant talk. Men rush to inspect it, lanterns bobbing as they move quickly along the narrow corridors. McNish's voice carries up from below. "She's taking strain, but she's holding." Shackleton nods once. "Good. Keep watch." Outside, the ice continues shifting. Pressure ridges rise another inch, cracking as they push upward. Snow dust swirls lightly over their peaks, carried by a faint breeze. The stars above glitter through the crisp air, sharp as pinpricks against the dark sky. For a moment, everything stills again. No movement, no cracking, no groaning. Just the steady cold, settling across the world like a heavy, unmoving hand. You exhale slowly, your breath trembling in the air. The ship creaks a soft, weary sound, and the deck beneath you feels as though it is adjusting to a new reality. Tonight is only the beginning. The ice has taken the first step in a long conversation with the Endurance One that will grow louder, stronger, and more unyielding in the days to come. You head below to your bunk, the faint groans of the hull following you down the ladder. As you settle into your blankets, you feel a subtle vibration travel through the boards beneath you, gentle but unmistakable. The pack ice is beginning to claim her place, and the ship is beginning to answer. You wake in the dimness before dawn, stirred by a sensation you cannot name, at first a faint trembling, a subtle vibration that moves through the boards beneath your bunk like a distant heartbeat. It is not loud, it is not violent, but it is steady, persistent, as though the ice has found a new rhythm and the ship is being made to follow it. You sit up slowly, letting your eyes adjust to the half-light filtering through the narrow porthole. Frost feathers the glass, forming crystalline patterns that shimmer faintly as the lantern in the corridor flickers. You hear no voices yet, no footsteps, only the soft groans of the hull, adjusting under unseen forces. When you step onto the deck, the world is wrapped in a gray that feels almost metallic. The air is sharper than yesterday, so cold it stings your lungs when you breathe too quickly. But it is not the temperature that captures your attention first. It is the angle. The Endurance has tilted more. You feel it at once, the moment your boots touch the deck. The slope is unmistakable gentle, but undeniably more than the night before. Snow drifts have slid toward the port side, collecting in soft, uneven ridges. Tools left on the deck have shifted slightly. A coil of rope rests now against the bulwark, having rolled several inches from where it lay yesterday. Worsley is already awake, standing at the rail with a small notebook in hand. He tests the angle with a weighted line, watching the plumb bob swing gently before settling against its mark. 4 degrees, he murmurs. Possibly 5. Shackleton joins him, breath forming slow clouds around his face. He studies the horizon, and the ridges forming near the starboard bow larger now, jagged and shimmering like frozen fins rising out of the ice. The pack's pressing from the west, he says quietly. More than before. You approach them, boot saws crunching softly in the new frost. Shackleton's face carries its usual calm, but his eyes are focused, scanning, measuring, calculating. Not fearful aware. Below deck, the men stir. The smell of porridge drifts upward as the cook begins breakfast, and the faint clatter of tin cups softens the tension that has settled across the ship. When everyone gathers in the mess cabin, conversation is hushed. Mechnish mentions hearing the beams creak before dawn. Crean jokes about the dogs snoring louder than the ship. Laughter comes, but thinly. Routine continues, because it must. After breakfast, you join a team sent onto the ice to test its stability. The rope ladder is stiff with frost as you descend. The moment your boots touch the surface, you sense the change. The ice is firmer, denser, but also restless. Small, hairline cracks show in the hard crust, their edges faintly glowing blue in the morning light. You kneel and place a gloved hand against the surface. It vibrates very softly, like the ground beneath a distant train. You rise, glancing toward the ship. Even locked in this vast frozen plain, the Endurance seems to shift subtly, adjusting under the pressure. The dogs bark behind you, their sharp voices piercing the silent expanse. Joyce quiets them with a firm gesture, then nods for you to follow. Together, the men move cautiously across the floe, inspecting the ship's hull from below. The sight unsettles you. The hull is no longer simply resting in the ice. It is gripped by it. Thick ridges press up against the planks, frozen in place like hands clutching the ship's sides. Frost has grown in layers around the waterline, building into crystalline shelves that jut outward. McNish taps the hull with the handle of his axe. The sound returns duller than before. Pressure's on her, he mutters. Not badly yet, but she feels it. Shackleton arrives on the ice moments later. He walks slowly around the ship, eyes tracing each ridge, each line of tension in the flow. He kneels once, brushing a gloved hand along a rising pressure line. We note every ridge, he says. Every crack, every shift. His voice is calm, but the men hear the weight beneath it. You return to the deck by midday. The sun struggles to push through the thickening haze, casting a pale yellow light across the frozen plain. A faint wind begins to move, stirring loose snow into low, drifting veils that curl around the rails before disappearing into the air. Then, without warning, the ice speaks. A deep, resonant boom rolls under the ship, strong enough to make the deck vibrate. Men freeze in place. Dogs bark frantically. A long crack races across the floe to the north, splitting into branching lines that glow briefly before sealing again under the cold. Another boom follows closer this time. A pressure ridge near the bow lifts 2 inches in a slow, deliberate motion. Shackleton's voice carries across the deck. Steady. Watch the starboard. Men rush to posts, securing gear, tightening lines, checking beam supports. The ship answers with a soft groan, her timbers flexing under the shifting load. Snow dislodges from the masts, floating down in a quiet shower of white. The pack tightens again. A third boom. A shudder. A faint tilt more to port. Inside, the carpenter and his crew inspect the framework. You can hear their axes tapping, their voices low and quick. The ship groans once more, a long, slow exhale that seems to travel from bow to stern. When the pressure eases, the world becomes eerily still. The wind stops, the cracking stops. Even the dogs fall silent. The men gather on deck, faces flushed with cold and tension. Shackleton walks among them, steadying nerves with a word or a nod. This is part of the drift, he says. The pack moves. We adapt. But every man there knows this is no simple drift. The ice is testing the ship, studying her the way Shackleton studies the sky. Later in the afternoon, the universe dims behind a curtain of cloud. Light becomes diffuse and colorless. The temperature drops sharply, the air tightening against your skin. The ship's timbers grow louder as the cold penetrates deeper, expanding the frozen ridges that cradle her hull. You help secure more equipment inside the holds, moving crates and supplies deeper into the ship's interior. In the narrow passages, lantern light flickers, casting long, trembling shadows that sway with each creak of the hull. A sudden crack echoes from outside, sharp, violent, decisive. Men flinch. Someone drops a tool. Snow falls from the ceiling beams in a fine dust. You rush topside to find Shackleton already there, eyes locked on a ridge forming 20 yards from the ship. Ice is pushing upward, rising like a jagged spine. The sound of grinding ice fills the air, a harsh metallic roar that vibrates through your teeth. The ridge grows. A towering slab tilts. Snow cascades off its surface in shimmering waves. The ship leans again half a degree, maybe a full one. Enough for crates to slide across the deck with a dull thud. Shackleton lifts a hand, steady, commanding. Hold where you are. The men obey. The pressure peaks for a moment, an excruciating, suspended moment where the whole world seems to tighten. Then it stops. The ridge settles. The noise fades. Stillness returns like a breath releasing. Evening falls heavy and dim. The lanterns on the deck glow faintly, their luminous halos blurred by swirling frost. The Endurance lies quiet now, though every groan of her timbers carries a hint of fatigue, of strain endured with stubborn pride. During supper, no one speaks loudly. Spoons scrape softly against metal bowls. The stove pops and crackles. The warmth feels almost fragile, as if borrowed from a world that is slowly moving farther and farther away. When Shackleton stands to speak, His voice is quiet but strong. The ice will test us, but we hold. We stay ready. The men nod. They trust him. You trust him. Even as the walls groan behind him, even as the beams shift during his words, he remains the calmest presence in the room. Later, as you lie in your bunk, the ship creaks around you, small, weary sounds that echo through the frame. You feel the faint, rhythmic push of the ice below, as though the entire frozen world is breathing against the hull. You exhale slowly, letting the cold settle around you. This is the beginning, the first true movement, the first test. The ice will not retreat now, and the ship will not surrender easily. You sense the path ahead tightening, narrowing, closing around the Endurance like a slow-moving trap. But you also sense this. This is where the story of survival begins. You wake to darkness, the kind of deep, muffled dark that feels thick in the air, as if the world outside has been smothered under layers of snow and silence. For a moment, you are unsure if it is early morning or still the dead of night. Only the faintest glow leaks around the edges of the cabin door, reflecting off frost-coated planks. The familiar breathing of men around you, slow and steady in their bunks, anchors you to the moment. Then it comes again, the sound that woke you. A slow, gliding groan. It vibrates through the mattress beneath your shoulders, travels up the beams, and settles into the low air of the bunk room. Not sharp, not urgent, but unmistakable. The voice of timber resisting something powerful, shifting under a pressure that grows more insistent each day. You rise, boots landing softly on the wooden floor. The cold rushes in, instantly biting your cheeks, tightening your throat with its dry sting. You pull your layers close and climb the ladder toward the deck, listening to every creak, every soft echo of strain. When you step outside, the world feels carved from a single piece of ice. Dawn has not yet arrived. Instead, the horizon holds the faintest band of silver blue light, like the thin edge of a blade cutting through the dark. Above it, a sky full of pale, unfocused stars waits in the frigid stillness. But it is not the sky that holds you. It is the ship. She leans farther than yesterday, noticeably so. The deck slopes under your feet, pulling your weight toward the port rail. Snow has gathered in uneven lines, caught in the angle of the deck, forming small drifts along the hull. Lanterns hung from the rigging sway, not with wind, but with the ship's subtle, involuntary adjustments under the tightening grip of the pack. Shackleton stands near the mainmast, still and focused, gloved hands wrapped loosely behind him. His silhouette is stark against the vast white, his breath drifting upward in long, steady trails. Worsley joins him, rubbing frost from his mustache. 5.5 degrees by my reading. Shackleton nods quietly. She's feeling it more. You sense the unspoken truth. Every degree means something. Every added angle bends the beams a little more, strains the planks a little further. The Endurance is strong, one of the strongest wooden ships ever built, but the ice that holds her is stronger still. The men gather slowly, stamping their boots, pulling collars higher against the morning chill. No one complains. They simply absorb the new reality as it arrives, the way they absorb the cold quietly, steadily. After breakfast, Shackleton sends teams out onto the floes again. You climb down the rope ladder, boots landing on ice that feels smoother and colder than yesterday. A thin layer of snow covers the surface, crunching softly with each step. The dogs bark and tug at their traces, their breath blooming in hot white clouds. You walk farther from the ship than before, inspecting pressure lines that have grown in jagged, uneven forms during the night. One ridge stands waist-high now, a massive slab of ice jutting upward like a frozen pillar. You place your hand on it and feel the cold radiate through your glove, a deep, ancient cold that seems almost alive. Hudson kneels beside a fissure running along the floe. It widened, he mutters, by at least a few inches. You crouch beside him. The crack glows faintly blue beneath its thin upper crust, the inner ice catching what little light filters through the gray sky. It is beautiful in a cruel way, a reminder that the world beneath your feet is shifting, reshaping itself constantly. Suddenly, a distant boom echoes across the frozen plain. The sound ripples through the air, a heavy, resonant wave that rolls beneath your boots. The dogs stiffen, ears pricked, bodies tense. Another boom. Then a crack, a sharp, snapping retort from somewhere beyond the horizon. Worsley calls from the deck, voice carrying clearly through the cold. Pressure to the south. Keep an eye on that ridge. The ridge answers before you can. It rises, slowly, steadily, pushed upward by the massive sheets pressing against one another. Snow spills from its surface. Crystals shatter silently into the air. The ridge cracks in two, one half climbing over the other with the sound of grinding stone. Shackleton raises a hand. Back aboard. Men scramble toward the ladder, not panicked, but swift. The ice is talking loudly now, and not in a language that forgives lingering. When you reach the deck, the ship groans again, long, low, aching. You brace a hand on the rail, feeling the vibration through the cold metal. Inside, the carpenter and his team prepare tools. Wooden wedges, iron braces, axes, lanterns. They know the drill. Reinforcements may be needed at any moment, and the deeper the pack grips the ship, the more those reinforcements will matter. You follow Shackleton below deck, stepping into the dark warmth of the lower corridors. Lanterns sway overhead, casting thin arcs of light across the beams. The air smells of cold wood, oil, and damp wool. McNish taps a main beam with the back of his axe. The dull thud answers back. Still solid, he says. But she's bending. Listen. He taps again. You hear it this time, a faint, deeper resonance beneath the first. A low counter-echo that suggests the beam is not moving entirely as it should. Shackleton places a hand against the timber, feeling the strain, reading the ship the way a doctor reads a pulse. Reinforcer, he says simply. The men set to work. Braces are hammered into place. Wedges are driven in with firm, rhythmic blows. Each strike vibrates through the ship, joining the soft groans of settling ice. The noise becomes a heartbeat of sorts, a steady rhythm of men against nature, wood against ice. By the time the crew finishes, the sun has dipped behind a cloud bank, turning the world above into a muted wash of pearl gray light. Snow begins to fall, fine, delicate flakes drifting in slow spirals. They land silently on coats, hats, decks, forming thin white lines on ropes and beams. You step outside again and feel the temperature plummet. A sudden gust of wind cuts across the deck, pushing the drifting snow into swirling eddies. The ice responds with a deep, echoing crack that seems to rise from the depths. The ship shifts slightly, barely a fraction of an inch, but enough for everyone to feel it. Shackleton moves quickly to the rail. His hand grips the cold wood as his eyes scan the ice. A pressure ridge near the stern shifts, rising. Another forms beside it. The flow beneath the bow tilts gently, and steadies, and then silence. The kind of silence that feels like a held breath. The crew stands motionless, listening. The dogs whine softly inside their shelters, sensing the tension even more keenly than the men. Finally, the creaking eases. The pressure slackens. The ship settles into her new angle. A whisper moves across the deck relief, mixed with dread. This is only the beginning. Dinner that evening is swallowed, almost entirely in subdued conversation. Men rub their hands near the stove, warming stiff fingers. Someone mentions hearing a beam pop loudly earlier. Another describes snow falling from the rigging when the hull groaned. The stove crackles, offering warmth that feels too fragile, too temporary. Shackleton sits at the far end of the table, looking at each man with a calm that steadies the room. His voice is gentle when he speaks. The pack is moving, We expect more nights like this. But the ship is strong, and so are we. Rest while you can. Afterward, you return to the deck one last time before sleep. The sky has darkened fully, leaving only a thin smudge of moonlight behind the clouds. Lanterns cast trembling halos across the rails, illuminating drifting snowflakes like tiny sparks. The ice stretches endlessly outward, fractured and gleaming in ghostly shades of white and blue. You place a hand on the rail. The metal is so cold, it feels almost alive. The ship hums faintly beneath your palm, a tired, strained hum that tells you she is resisting something enormous. You linger there for a moment, breathing in the freezing air. Tomorrow, the ice will push harder. Tomorrow, the ridges will grow higher. Tomorrow, the slow tightening around the ship will become impossible to ignore. You descend the ladder, hearing the hull groan softly behind you, like a quiet warning from an old wooden beast learning the limits of its strength. You slip into your bunk, pulling the blankets close, feeling the cold seep into your bones despite the layers. The ship shifts gently once more, settling deeper into the ice. Then silence returns heavy, patient, waiting. You close your eyes. You wake before any bell or call, roused by a tremor so subtle you might have mistaken it for part of a dream, except it comes again, this time clearer. A faint vibration moves through the planks beneath your bunk, a slow, rolling pressure that feels like the ice breathing against the hull. You listen in the dim half-light, eyes adjusting to the faint glow slipping through cracks in the wooden wall. Then another sound reaches you, a brittle talk-sharp, sudden, unmistakable, a being shifting. The cold has changed overnight. You feel it the moment you sit up. It clings to your breath, stiffens your eyelashes, bites into your fingers, even through wool. It is the kind of cold that compresses wood, tightens ice, and makes the world outside harden into something less forgiving. When you step onto the deck, dawn is only a pale suggestion on the horizon. The sky glows with the faintest lavender mist, fading into a deep blue that feels too cold even to hold color. The deck slopes beneath your boots, more than yesterday. Snow has drifted to port in thin, dusty waves, gathering near the bulwark like blown sand. You walk carefully, adjusting to the tilt. Shackleton is already there. He stands near the bow, coat stiff with frost, his face set in calm concentration. His eyes scan the ice, not the surface, but the deeper movements, the subtle shifts in pattern and texture. You join him quietly, and only when he speaks does your breath finally steady. "She moved a good deal last night," he says softly. Worsley approaches, holding a weighted line. He lets it settle, watches the bob swing, then still. 7 degrees, he reports. Nearly 8. A number settles into your chest like a weight. 8 degrees is not catastrophic, but it is meaningful. It tells you the pressure is no longer teasing or threatening. It is working. And the ship is responding. Breakfast is subdued. The stove burns brightly, but even its heat seems thin today. Men hover near it, rubbing their hands, warming their faces before settling onto benches. Conversations drift in low murmurs. Felt a jolt around midnight. Sounded like the hull groaned in its sleep. You think she keep taking this strain? Shackleton steps into the mess cabin, and the murmur is still. His presence is not loud, not dominating, but it centers the room. He offers a few quiet words, nothing dramatic. The ice is moving. We'll keep watch. We'll reinforce where we must. She's a good ship. A few nods, a few deep breaths. Then tasks resume, because tasks are what hold worry at bay. You join a group sent onto the ice to survey the starboard pressure ridges. The rope ladder shakes slightly as you descend. The ship's angle makes each rung feel steeper, each step more deliberate. When your boots touch the ice, a chill runs through your legs, not from cold, but from the vibration humming faintly beneath the frozen surface. You walk several steps away from the ladder, listening, feeling. A pressure line snakes across the floe, its edges sharp, its center freshly split. It wasn't there yesterday. The ridge itself is taller now shoulder height, its surface fractured into gleaming shards. Snow dusts its top, but the blue heart of the ice glows beneath, cold and ancient. Hudson presses his glove against it. She's shoved up with real force here, he mutters. You nod. The ridge looks violent, as though the ice beneath the ship and the ice beneath the ridge fought during the night, each trying to climb the other. Suddenly, a dog howls. Joyce turns sharply. The entire team freezes. A distant rumble rolls under the ice deeper than thunder, smoother than wind. It vibrates through your boots, travels up your legs, settles in your ribs. Another rumble follows, closer, sharper. Pressure's building, someone says. A crack shoots across the ice to the south, splitting the surface like lightning. Another forms to the east. Snow jumps from the nearest ridge. The dogs bark wildly, pulling at their traces. Shackleton's voice rings across the floe. All hands back aboard. The urgency in his tone is unmistakable, not panic, but certainty. You scramble toward the ship with the others. A floe trembles once more beneath you. The rope ladder sways as men climb. The hull groans loudly, almost in protest. By the time you reach the deck, the ship shivers like a living thing trying to brace itself. A deep, violent boom echoes from the port side. Men rush to the rail. A massive pressure ridge rises slowly, ominously pushing upward as sheets of ice collide. It grows to chest height, then shoulder height, splitting into jagged layers like broken glass. Snow cascades from its sides in glittering streams. The ship tilts a fraction more. Worsley grips the rail with white knuckles. She's lifting under the keel. Another boom. Another crack. The ridge grows again, ice grinding with a roar that sets your teeth on edge. Shackleton shouts toward the carpenter. Get below. Check beams. McNish and two others rush down the ladder. You hear their boots pounding along the lower deck, the echo of axes tapping wood, the muttered curses under their breath. Then comes the worst sound yet, a sharp, splintering crack. Not from the ice this time, from the ship. Men freeze. Lanterns sway. Even the dogs fall silent. The hull gives a low, agonized groan that feels like a cry held under strain. The deck trembles. Snow falls from the rigging like shaken dust. You grip the mast to steady yourself. Shackleton stands firm, watching the ice with a stillness that steadies the men. He turns only when McNish returns, breathing hard. A beam's bowed, the carpenter announces. Not broken, but straining. Shackleton nods once. Reinforce it. He never shows fear. He never raises his voice. And because of that, no one else breaks either. The men work below for hours hammering braces, tightening bolts, driving wedges. Every strike echoes through the hull, blending into the groans and cracks from the ice outside. By late afternoon, the pressure eases. Not entirely, but enough that the ship settles slightly, adjusting to a new equilibrium. The angle remains, but the violent sounds quiet. The world falls into a heavy, exhausted silence. You step onto the ice again with Shackleton and Worsley. The ridges are monstrous, now towering spines of shattered ice. Each ridge rises in jagged lines that cast long, eerie shadows across the snow. They glow faintly in the weak sunlight, like the ribs of some buried giant exposed by shifting earth. Shackleton examines one ridge with narrowed eyes. The pack isn't loosening, he murmurs. It will keep building. Worsley sighs softly. You think she can stand it? Shackleton rests a hand on the ice. She will stand as long as she must. Evening comes quietly, but the quiet feels deceptive. The light drains from the sky, leaving a wash of gray that deepens into blue-black. Lanterns flicker along the deck, forming warm circles of light on the slanted planks. Dinner is somber. Men eat hungrily, but without conversation. Every ear is tuned to the faint groans of the hull, listening for changes in pitch, sharpness, rhythm. McNish reports that the bracing is holding for now. The cook tries to lighten spirits with a joke. A few smiles appear, thin but real. Later, you return to the deck one last time before sleep. The world is pitch dark, except for a thin line of moonlight glistening across the ice. The pressure ridges loom like frozen cathedrals, casting jagged shadows that stretch across the floe. The ship is silent, save for the occasional soft creak her way of breathing in the cold. You rest your hands on the rail, feeling the chilled metal bite through your gloves. The ice is not done. You can sense it in the air, in the vibration deep in the hull, in the tension that never truly leaves the deck. But for this moment, the world is still. You descend to your bunk. The ship shifts slightly beneath you, tired, weathered, but holding on. You close your eyes as the ice waits in the dark. You wake to a world that feels heavier than the one you fell asleep in. Even before your eyes open, you sense it. The stiffness in the air, the cold that presses closer than usual, the faint but persistent tilt of the ship beneath your bunk. The Endurance is leaning just a touch more. Not enough to alarm someone new, but enough that you, after months aboard her, feel the difference immediately. A low groan rises from the hull, long and slow, like the ship exhaling under weight. You sit up, letting your breath adjust to the icy air. Your lashes feel stiff again, frost having formed during the night. When you swing your legs off the bunk and stand, you feel the angle at once. The slope pulls you subtly toward the port side, guiding your steps like an unseen hand. Men whisper to each other in the dim light. No one panics. No one raises a voice. They simply gather their gear with the quiet efficiency born of routine and necessity. You climb to the deck. The sky looks carved from lead. Thick clouds veil the horizon, muting the light into a cold, silvery haze. Snowflakes drift softly, not in heavy sheets, but in a fine, constant fall that makes every breath feel like inhaling cold dust. The ice around the ship stretches endlessly, broken only by the jagged silhouettes of pressure ridges that have grown taller overnight. The ship's angle is unmistakable now. Worsley stands near the rail, measuring the list again with his weighted line. He frowns slightly, though he speaks evenly when Shackleton approaches. 8 degrees, Worsley says. Almost 9. Shackleton studies the ice. His breath forms slow, steady clouds. His coat is stiff with frost, the fur lining glittering faintly, but his posture is calm-centered. She's still solid, he says, but the strain's increasing. He turns, surveying the deck, the sky, the drifting snow. Then, with a voice as steady as the ice is unpredictable, we'll keep watch. And we stay ready. After breakfast, another thin porridge, a few biscuits, and whatever warmth the stove can provide, you join a team headed to the ice. The ladder is slick with frost, and the tilt of the ship makes your descent feel sharper, as if the world has leaned too far in one direction. The moment your boots touch the floe, you feel it. The ice is restless. Not violently so, not like the cracking of yesterday, but with a subdued energy. It vibrates faintly beneath your soles, as though responding to distant movements you cannot yet see. You walk several steps, each one producing a faint hollow sound that wasn't there before. Hudson kneels beside a crack that has widened overnight. It's opening bit by bit, he murmurs. Pressure's pushing from the southeast now. The crack's edges are sharp, freshly split, glowing deep blue where the ice has broken clean. Snow has not yet filled it. It is newborn from forces beneath the surface. You glance toward the ship. The Endurance looks noble still, her masts rising proudly, her lines strong against the flat expanse. But her hull sits deeper, pressed by the ice that grips her more tightly each day. She looks less like a vessel at sea and more like a creature trapped in the jaws of something ancient. You and the others walk farther, circling a massive pressure ridge that towers nearly as tall as a man. Its surface is a maze of sharp edges and smooth curves, formed by layers of shattered ice being forced upward. Touching it, you feel the cold radiate through your glove, deeper than the air, almost biting. Just as Joyce is examining another fissure, a dog barks sharply. Then another. A third. You whirl around. The ice beneath your feet trembles a deep rumble, uncoiling from far below. It moves through the flow like a slow, rolling wave. Worsley shouts from the deck, "Stand clear!" The sound intensifies deep, resonant, growing into a thunder that vibrates through your chest. Then boom! A pressure ridge to the west erupts upward, splitting violently along its center. The slab rises, shuddering, shedding snow in a glittering cascade. The dogs lunge in their traces, barking wildly. Men scramble to keep footing as the ice shifts under them. Back aboard. Shackleton's voice cuts through the chaos. Now! Your pulse spikes, but your steps remain controlled. Panic has no place here. Not when every misstep could mean a fall into water, hidden beneath snow, or into a closing crevasse. The ladder swings as you climb. The ship groans sharply a sound of wood under duress strained past comfort. When you reach the deck, men are already bracing loose equipment, tightening lines, and checking beams. Another boom echoes across the ice. Then comes the worst sound of the morning. A splitting crack loud, sharp, unmistakable, rips through the hull. Conversation stops. Movements freeze. Even the dogs whine and go silent. McNish rushes up from below deck. Starboard beams tuck in heavy strain, bowing more than yesterday. Shackleton steps toward the ladder. "Show me." He moves with controlled urgency, and you follow, descending into the lower hold. Lantern light flickers across the walls, casting uneven shadows. The temperature is colder down here, the air sharper. McNish holds his lantern to the main support beam. A long arc of stress lines find fractures in the wood snake across its surface. Not broken, but bending, surrendering millimeter by millimeter to the crushing force outside. Shackleton places his palm on the timber. He closes his eyes. Deep breath, measured, steady. "We reinforce again," he says quietly, "and we continue our watch. You spend hours helping the carpenter's party. Braces are removed and reset. New wedges are driven in. Bolts are tightened. The air rings with the sounds of hammers striking wood, the rhythmic thudding echoing through the hull. Occasionally, another groan ripples through the ship, long, low, tired. You feel it every time, like the heartbeat of a creature slowly being crushed. By midday, the interior is secure again, at least temporarily. You climb back onto the deck, where a pale sun struggles through the clouds. The light it casts is thin and cold, illuminating the new landscape around the ship. The ridges are enormous now. Some rise at angles so steep they look like frozen waves stopped mid-crest. Others form jagged walls, their edges sharp as broken stone. Snow drifts curl around their bases, sculpted by wind and pressure into smooth, flowing shapes. It is beautiful and terrifying. The ice is no longer just a surface you travel across. It is an unpredictable, shifting world with moods and tempers, capable of quiet hours and sudden violence. The ship leans again during the afternoon, just slightly, but unmistakably. Men steady themselves with practiced ease. Ropes swing. Loose snow slides toward the port rail, gathering in small heaps. Shackleton calls for another round of inspections. The deck, the masts, the dog lines, the stores, they are all checked, tightened, secured. No one wastes time. There is no luxury of assuming the next hour will be quiet. Dinner that evening is subdued, though the cook does his best to keep spirits up. He ladles out hot stew and cracks a joke about the ice, trying to join them for supper. A few men chuckle. Others just stare at their bowls, lost in thought. Shackleton stands at the head of the table, offering a few calm words. We hold fast. She's built strong, and we are stronger still. His confidence settles the room. Night comes like a silent flood, spilling across the sky and smothering what little color remained. Lanterns cast golden circles on the slanted deck. Snowflakes drift slowly, catching the light in brief sparks before disappearing into the dark. You step outside before turning in. The world is vast and motionless. The ridges loom like frozen monuments. The ice creaks softly beneath the stillness. You feel a pressure in the air, not a physical one, but a sense that something is building. A momentum, a shift, a turn in the story unfolding around you. The ship groans once, long and deep. It echoes through the deck, through the rail beneath your hands, through your chest. You exhale slowly. Tomorrow, the ice will move again. Tomorrow, the pressure will return. Tomorrow, the endurance will face another day in the grip of forces that do not negotiate. You descend to your bunk, the ship tilting gently, as though settling deeper into the jaws of winter. You close your eyes to the sound of the hull whispering in the dark. You are awakened before dawn by a sensation that feels almost like drifting. For a moment, you think the ship is moving, truly moving, gliding forward through open water. It is a fleeting illusion, gone as soon as your thoughts sharpen, but it lingers long enough to unsettle you. The Endurance hasn't moved freely in months. The ice has claimed her too completely for that. But the feeling remains. A vibration through the beams. A slow, rolling shift beneath your bunk. Not violent, not explosive, just a steady, deliberate push from below. You sit up. The cold is deeper today. Not the piercing sting of wind or frost, but the heavy, consuming cold that seeps into wood and bone alike. It wraps itself around your breath, tightening your chest. The air feels older somehow, as if the night froze time itself. You climb the ladder to the deck, hearing the hull groan faintly with each step. The ship's tilt is unmistakable, more pronounced now, pulling your balance toward port. Your boots slide slightly along the frost-slick planks as you steady yourself. The sky is a muted expanse of gray-blue, layered with low clouds that hide the sun. A dim glow filters through them, enough to give shape to the world, but not enough to color it. Snowflakes drift in a fine, constant fall, barely visible until they catch the light. The ice has changed again. Pressure ridges rise all around the ship like frozen battlements, taller, sharper, more twisted in form than before. Some lean against each other, forming jagged walls. Others stand alone, fractured pillars sculpted by unseen forces. They loom silently, but their silence feels deceptive. Several men are already on deck. Worsley stands at the rail, notebook in hand, his breath clouding the cold air. Greenstreet leans against a support, stamping his boots to restore feeling. Crean rubs his hands briskly, surveying the horizon. When Shackleton emerges, heads turn instinctively. His presence never needs announcement. He scans the ice, his gaze moving with deliberate precision across every ridge, every shadow, every subtle sign of shift. His breath is steady, his expression controlled, but there is a tightness around his eyes that wasn't there earlier in the week. Worsley steps toward him. List is holding at nearly 9 degrees, he says. She might settle more by evening. Shackleton nods once. We'll monitor hourly. No assumptions. You look out across the floe, seeing what he sees. The ice isn't merely holding the ship. It is lifting her, turning her, testing her. After a brief gathering on deck, Shackleton divides the morning tasks. You join the team checking the ice conditions around the bow. The rope ladder trembles faintly as you descend. The moment your boots touch the floe, you feel it. The surface is taut, as if stretched across something moving beneath. The dogs bark and howl in response to sounds you barely hear, faint rumbles, deep murmurs of shifting ice far below the surface. Their instincts are sharper than yours. They sense the tension long before men do. The ridge closest to the bow has grown dramatically. You place a hand on it. The ice feels almost warm, not in temperature, but in its internal energy. The pressure radiates through it like a heartbeat. Tiny crystals crackle under your glove. Joyce crouches near a widening fissure. "Never seen one grow this fast," he mutters. Split right open sometime after midnight. The fissure is long and clean, its inner walls glowing with the deep blue of dense, ancient ice. Snow hasn't had time to fill it yet. It's brand new. You exchange a glance with Hudson. The ice is accelerating. Before you can investigate further, a low, resonant tremor rolls through the flow. It's not violent, not yet, but it builds quickly, rising through your boots, into your legs, settling in your ribs. The dogs cry out again, straining against their leads. Snow along the ridge shivers loose, falling in soft cascades. Then comes the unmistakable sound. Boom. A pressure wave slams beneath the ice, spreading outward in a deep, rolling roar. It hits the ridge closest to the bow. The ridge rises slow at first, and with brute force as slabs of ice grind and climb over each other. "Back aboard," someone shouts. But the warning comes a breath too late. The flow beneath your feet shifts abruptly, tilting. You stumble, catching your balance as the world tilts a few inches beneath you. A crack shoots across the surface wide enough that you can see the black water gleaming through. Men scramble to the ladder. The dogs are half lifted in the air as handlers tug them toward safety. The flow groans with a low, gut-deep rumble, as if the earth itself were straining. The ship responds her haul, groaning in a harsh, tortured cry that echoes across the ice. You reach the ladder in time to feel the ship shift under the building pressure. The moment you pull yourself onto the deck, a violent shudder travels through her timbers. Snow falls in thick plumes from the rigging. Inside the hull, a loud crack splits the silence. Then another. Then a third. Men on deck freeze, every muscle tense, every breath held. McNish rushes topside, face pale under his frost-crusted beard. "It's the forward beams," he shouts, straining like I've never seen. Shackleton moves instantly. "Below, now." You follow him into the hold, lantern swinging as you descend. The air down here is colder than the deck, heavy with the smell of wood under stress. The beams moan long, aching tones that reverberate through the walls. McNish points to one of the main supports near the bow dot. It's bowed outward, just a little, but enough that even you, untrained in carpentry, know it should not look that way. A thin line barely more than a shadow runs along the grain of the beam. A hairline fracture. Shackleton studies it in silence. The lantern light flickers across his eyes, reflecting calm focus, not fear, but resolve. "We reinforce again," he says. "More braces. More wedges. Everything we have. You work for hours hammering, tightening, forcing supports into place while the ship groans around you. The cold bites at your fingers despite your gloves. Sweat freezes on your collar. The sound of tools striking wood blends into the deeper, more ominous symphony of ice grinding against the hull. By the time the reinforcement holds, your muscles ache and your breath burns. You climb back onto the deck, where the world is transformed into a landscape of jagged ice spires glowing faintly in the weak sunlight. The ship leans 10 degrees now, maybe more. Shackleton stands at the rail, surveying the horizon with narrowed eyes. "She's fighting," he murmurs. "But the ice means to test her strength." Worsley joins him. "Do you think she'll hold through the night?" Shackleton doesn't answer immediately. He studies the ridges, the angle, the sky. Finally he speaks, voice calm, deliberate, unwavering. "She will hold as long as she must. And we stay ready for whatever comes next." The men hear him, and they believe him, even if the ice does not. Dinner is quieter still that evening, though the cook works hard to warm the men with hot stew and tea. The wind whistles softly outside, carrying loose snow in thin trails across the deck. The lanterns flicker with the weight of the cold. Later, when you walk onto the deck before turning in, you find the world nearly silent. No distant cracks. No booming pressure waves. Just the gentle whisper of snow falling and the slow breathing of the ship beneath your boots. You place a hand on the rail. The metal bites into your glove. The hull hums faintly, a tired, strained hum. The pressure has eased for now, but the ice is not finished. Not by a long measure. You breathe deeply, letting the cold settle in your lungs. Tomorrow, everything may change again. Tomorrow, the ice may show its full force. Tomorrow, the ship may face pressures she was never built to endure. But tonight, she stands, and so do you. You wake to a strange stillness, an unsettling kind of quiet that doesn't feel like rest or peace, but rather a held breath, a pause before movement. The darkness in the bunk room feels heavier than usual, as if the air itself has thickened overnight. For a long moment, you lie completely still, listening. No cracking, no booming, no sudden shifts. Only the faint groan of the hull, long and tired, like an old giant murmuring in its sleep. You swing your legs over the bunk and feel the tilt immediately deeper than yesterday. The list pulls you toward the port side, subtle but unrelenting. Every boot step down the narrow passage exaggerates the angle, reminding you that the ship is no longer resting atop the ice. She is being held, squeezed, lifted, bent. You climb the ladder to the deck. A cold metallic taste settles on your tongue the moment the hatch opens. The air is dry, sharp enough to sting your lungs. The sky is a uniform sheet of pale gray, the sun hidden behind it like a faint memory. Snow falls softly, drifting in lazy spirals that seem almost peaceful until you remember what peace has meant here of late, preparation for something worse. The Endurance groans under your boots, her timbers protesting the growing strain. The sound flows through the planks like a warning. A few men cluster near the mainmast, faces drawn, breaths forming white clouds in the freezing air. Worsley checks the list again with his weighted line. He frowns. 10 degrees, he murmurs. Shackleton appears moments later, moving with quiet confidence despite the cold and the increasing tilt of the deck. His eyes sweep over the pressure ridges that surround the ship. They seem even taller today, rising like jagged cliffs of shattered ice. Some lean inward, angled toward the ship as though closing in. The boss speaks softly, but everyone nearby hears him. We stay vigilant today. No unnecessary risk. You glance across the ridge lines. The ice looks frozen solid, unmoving, but you've learned that looks deceive. Pressure can build under a calm surface, gathering strength without noise or warning. After a brief round of orders, Shackleton sends you with Greenstreet and McElroy to inspect the ice at the bow. The rope ladder is stiff with frost, creaking as you descend. The flow meets your boots with surprising firmness. Too firm, almost brittle. You press your heel into the surface. The top layer cracks slightly, revealing deeper blue beneath. The cold is tightening the ice. Hudson gestures to a fissure along the bow. This one's grown, he says, by at least 3 inches. The crack runs long and straight, its edges clean and sharp, fresh. Snow hasn't had time to settle into it yet. You crouch, tracing the edge with a gloved finger. The inner ice glows faintly, the telltale sign of recent movement. A low rumble sweeps under the flow. It's soft, almost gentle, but unmistakable. You rise quickly. The dogs sense it too. They bark and whine, their bodies tense, claws scraping against the hard ice. Worsley's voice carries from the deck. Heads up. Then you hear it, the crackling whisper that precedes a pressure wave. It sounds like sheets of glass breaking underwater, a cascading series of pops and snaps. Before you can move, the flow beneath you trembles. A booming vibration rolls through your boots and into your chest. The ridge nearest the bow lurches upward, splitting along its center. A massive slab of ice tilts, rising higher, shedding powdery snow in glittering veils. "Back aboard," Shackleton calls. The urgency in his voice is new. Sharper. You run. The flow shifts again, tilting just enough that your footing becomes precarious. Snow opens along a fresh crack, small but deep. A dark sliver of water gleams beneath it for a moment, before freezing fog swirls over the gap. You reach the ladder just as another rumble shakes the ridge. The ship groans loudly, a wrenching, pained sound that echoes through the ice. As you haul yourself onto the deck, a violent crack splits the air. The hull shudders. Men grab rails to steady themselves. Snow cascades from the rigging in thick showers. McNish rushes from below deck, eyes wide. The forward beams are straining again. He shouts, and the hull's bending more at the bilge. Shackleton moves with calm urgency. "Below," he orders. "Reinforce everything we can." You follow him into the hold. The lantern light flickers over the beams. The air is cold enough to burn your throat with each breath. You hear it instantly, a rhythmic creaking, punctuated by deeper, more ominous groans. McNish points to the same main support beam from yesterday. The fracture has grown. A fine white line of frost collects along it, marking the fresh strain. The beam bows inward by a hair's breadth more than before, but down here, a hair's breadth can mean everything. Shackleton examines it, jaw tightening slightly, but his voice remains steady. We brace it again. Keep pressure distributed. All hands move. Axes strike wood. Wedges are driven into place. Braces are adjusted. Sweat drips despite the cold, freezing quickly at your collar. The ship groans again louder, sharper this time. It feels as though she's crying out under pressure, as though her wooden ribs are being twisted by invisible hands. Hours pass. By midday, the ice's assault slows. The vibrations ease. The ship steadies, still tilted, but no longer shuddering. You climb back onto the deck, exhausted. The world outside has transformed once more. The pressure ridges loom higher, forming jagged walls that surround the ship. They cast long shadows across the snow, creating the illusion of massive frozen waves about to crash down. The sky is pale and washed out, as if drained by the cold. Shackleton steps onto the floe with you to survey the damage. He walks slowly around the bow, studying each ridge, each crack, each new sign of strain. "These ridges are growing faster," he says quietly. The pack's moving with determination. Worsley joins him. "Drifting west at half a mile a day." Shackleton nods. "We must stay flexible. Prepare for any shift." Evening draws in with a heavy, quiet weight. The wind barely stirs. Snow falls in delicate spirals, illuminated faintly by lanterns along the deck. The ship's tilt makes movement awkward. Cups slide on tables. Tools shift subtly. Boots scrape along angled planks. Dinner is subdued. Men eat with tired hands, their eyes drifting toward the ceiling when the ship creaks or the wind moans outside. The cook does what he can, offering hot meat and tea to warm spirits. Someone cracks a joke about the ship wanting to lie down for a nap. The laughter that follows is thin, but it helps. Afterward, Shackleton stands. He doesn't make speeches. He doesn't offer false hope. He simply says, "We take each day as it comes. The ship is strong, and together we are stronger." Then he sits again. The men relax by a fraction, as if his calm were something that could be shared. Later, when you step outside for fresh air, you find the world transformed by near darkness. The pressure ridges glow faintly under the thin moonlight, their edges shimmering with frost. The silence is immense, so complete it feels like a physical presence. You walk carefully to the rail. Your breath creates small clouds before your face. The ship groans a little beneath you softly this time. almost like a tired sigh. You rest your hand on the cold wood. The endurance is fighting, the ice is tightening, and you are caught between them. A quiet witness to a slow struggle of unimaginable force. As you turn toward the hatch, you hear one last sound, a faint, distant crack that echoes across the frozen plain. You pause. Then the world falls silent again. You descend to your bunk, the ship leaning gently, the future uncertain. But you sleep, because tomorrow the ice will move again. You wake before the others, roused by a sound so strange and unfamiliar that for several seconds your mind cannot place it. It is faint, almost polite in its volume, but incredibly wrong in its tone, like a wooden violin string pulled too tight and beginning to fray. A trembling, splintering note that travels through the hull and into your bones. You sit upright in the darkness. The ship is not merely groaning now. She is complaining. You swing your legs to the floor. The tilt pulls you sharply to port. It is worse, noticeably worse. You steady yourself against the edge of your bunk and inhale the brittle cold. Frost forms on your sleeve when you lift your arm. Around you, the crew begins to stir. Not talking, listening. Every man shares the same unspoken understanding. The ice is entering a new phase of pressure. A slower, heavier, more deliberate crush. The ship shifts again under your feet. Just a fraction. Just enough for a tin cup on a table nearby to slide 2 inches, spin once, and fall to the floor. You climb to the deck. The world greets you with a silence that feels intelligent. The sky is a seamless blanket of white. No sun, no horizon. Just light diffused through miles of low cloud, making the air seem thick enough to touch. The temperature has dropped again down into a realm of cold that feels almost unreal, the kind that sucks warmth from you the moment you inhale. The ice surrounding the ship has changed once more. Pressure ridges tower around you, like the frozen ruins of some ancient city, sharp, jagged walls rising at unnatural angles. Their surfaces are fractured and shimmering, catching the diffuse light and scattering it in ghostly hues of blue and silver. Some lean inward toward the ship, as if drawn by a magnet. Others jet outward like the bones of a collapsed beast. Snowdrifts swirl around them, lifted by faint breezes you cannot feel. The entire landscape looks like a single frozen breath, held in suspense. Worsley stands at the rail with his weighted line, the string swaying slightly in the still air. 11 degrees, he reports quietly when Shackleton approaches. She's leaning more by the hour. Shackleton's face remains calm, but his jaw tenses ever so slightly. He studies the ridges. He studies the horizon. He studies the ship, not with fear, but with profound attention, absorbing every detail. We watch closely today, he says. We prepare for anything. Words like that do not come lightly from him. Breakfast is subdued. Porridge again. Tea again. The stove crackles weakly, fighting a losing battle against the cold that creeps through every seam. Men sit at uneven angles, adjusting instinctively to the tilt of the ship. No one complains. No one panics. They eat quietly, listening to the wood stretch and shift as the hull endures more pressure. Halfway through the meal, a loud crack echoes from below, the kind of sound that freezes every muscle in a man's body. Heads snap upward, eyes widen. Cups pause mid-air. A long, slow groan follows deeper than any before, resonant enough to vibrate the bench beneath you. The sound rolls through the mess like the roar of a distant avalanche. Shackleton stands. Below, he says. Just one word, but the entire crew moves instantly. You follow him into the hold, the lantern light flickering as cold air rushes around you. The beams and supports loom above you like ribs inside a wooden leviathan. But today, those ribs look dangerously tense, as if the entire creature is bracing itself against an invisible weight. McNish is already there, lantern raised to illuminate the worst of it. The main beam near the bow has bowed further. Not a fracture yet, but close. Fine lines spiderweb across its surface, delicate and pale, like frost tracing veins across fragile glass. Pressure's building fast, McNish says grimly. She won't take this forever. Shackleton steps close, placing his palm against the timber. The beam vibrates beneath his hand, a subtle trembling note that carries the echo of deep ice pushing inward. We reinforce again, he says. Heavier this time, and the crew moves with the intensity of men who understand that seconds matter. Axes ring against wood. Hammers strike iron. Wedges are slammed into place with powerful blows that reverberate through the hold. Sweat forms beneath your layers despite the cold, your breath coming out in sharp bursts. The sound of your hammer merges with the deeper groans of the hull. Hours pass in a blur of work and tension. Finally, the reinforcement holds for the moment. The strain lines no longer widen. The beam steadies. The groans soften not, but the ice has not finished. When you climb to the deck again, the world has exploded in movement. A massive pressure ridge to the starboard side is rising slowly, majestically, terrifyingly. It heaves upward like the back of a surfacing whale, scattering snow in cascading plumes. The ridge leans, groaning, creaking, climbing until its peak stands taller than 3 men. The sound fills the air a grinding roar, a violent chorus of ice against ice. Men rush to the rail. Someone curses under his breath. Another mutters a prayer. The ship tilts again steeper this time. Loose tools slide across the deck. A crate tips over and crashes into the bulwark. Snow pours off the rigging like white sand. Shackleton raises a hand. Stand fast. You grip a line as the ship shudders violently. A deep boom roars beneath the hull, followed by a sharp, splintering crack from below. The pressure ridge slams inward slightly, scraping against the ship's side. The contact is brief, but jarring. The hull groans in protest. Worsley steadies himself beside you. The floes are rafting, he says between clenched teeth. One sliding over the other. Another boom got another violent jolt, that other groan from the hull. Shackleton's voice remains calm despite the chaos. Hold where you are. Minutes stretch into agonizing lengths as the ice shifts, buckles, rises, and settles. The ship finally steadies, not because the pressure stops, but because the ice has locked into a new configuration. Everything is still again, but it is the stillness of exhaustion, not peace. That afternoon, you are sent out on the floe again to inspect damage. The ladder leans at a steeper angle now, making your descent awkward. The ice greets your boots with a solid, unyielding hardness. The ridge that rose earlier now towers like a frozen cliff. You walk slowly around it, feeling the cold radiate outward like heat reversed. The deep blue layers of compressed ice glow faintly in the dim light. A fissure runs along the base wide and dangerously deep. Peering into it, you see glimmers of dark water far below, swirling sluggishly beneath the frozen sheets. Joyce whistles softly. If that splits further, she'd be squeezed from both sides. You say nothing. There is nothing to say. Returning aboard feels like climbing into a fortress besieged by an enemy you cannot see. Dinner is eaten quietly again. The cook tries to lift spirits by offering an extra spoonful of stew to everyone, saying the ship herself ordered it. A few men chuckle weakly. Most simply nod and eat, grateful for something warm. Shackleton speaks briefly afterward, his voice steady and controlled. We take each moment as it comes. We trust the ship. And we trust each other? Simple words. Powerful words. Enough to steady hearts, if not the ice. Later, you step out onto the deck. Night has fallen not as a deep, star-filled darkness, but as a soft gray murk, thick with falling snow. The lanterns cast golden halos that blur into the drifting flakes, giving the deck a dreamlike quality. You walk carefully, feeling the ship's angle beneath your boots. She leans heavily now, as though caught mid-dive into the ice. A deep groan echoes through the hull, slow, resonant, tired. You rest a hand on the rail. The wood is so cold it burns. The pressure ridges loom like giants in the shadows, their jagged forms lost in the swirling snow. Every so often, you hear faint cracks echo across the flow, sharp reminders that the world beneath you is shifting even when you cannot see it. You breathe deeply, letting the cold fill your lungs. The ship is struggling. The ice is relentless, and you are in the middle of a battle fought in silence and crushing force. You descend to your bunk, the deck tilting beneath your feet. The Endurance groans softly, as if whispering to you, reminding you that tomorrow will test her again. And you know, without doubt, that tomorrow will be worse. You wake not to movement, but to the distinct absence of it. For a long moment, you lie still in your bunk, sensing the world around you with a strange, instinctive awareness you've developed after months trapped in the ice. The ship is too quiet. Even the creaks, those soft, familiar murmurs of timber under strain, are absent, as if the Endurance herself is holding her breath. You rise slowly. Your boots meet the slanted floor, and the list pulls you noticeably to port. Not just a minor tilt now. The entire ship feels as though she has been leaned deliberately onto her side, set into a position she would never choose for herself. You listen again. Still nothing. No cracking ice. No booming pressure waves. Not even the groan of the hull adjusting. This quiet is the kind that unnerves even the strongest men. The air bites at your cheeks when you step into the corridor. Frost coats the wooden walls in thin, delicate layers that glitter faintly in the pale morning light seeping through the portholes. You climb to the deck, boots scraping softly along the angled ladder. The world outside has transformed once again. The sky is a dim, colorless dome with no clear horizon. Snow sweeps across the deck in thin curtains, drifting sideways in lazy arcs. The wind whispers not loudly, but endlessly, carrying small grains of ice that sting your exposed skin. The Endurance is frozen into a new posture. Her bow is lifted nearly 3 feet above the ice, the stern pressed deeper. The deck lists sharply. The masts lean noticeably. Loose ropes hang at strange angles, as if gravity itself has been altered. Men stand silently near the rail, their breaths forming white plumes. No one speaks at first. They simply stare at the pressure ridges surrounding the ship, now so close, so massive, that they feel like walls closing in. When Shackleton steps onto the deck, all eyes turn to him. He pauses, taking in the scene with a slow, controlled breath. Frost rinds his beard. His coat is dusted with snow. Yet he stands perfectly steady, despite the tilt beneath his feet. Worsley approaches him, face tight with concern. "List is almost 12 degrees now," he says quietly. "She's being squeezed from both sides." Shackleton nods once. "Let's walk the ice." He gathers a small team, Worsley, Crean, McElroy, you, and together you descend the rope ladder, careful with every step. The angle of the ship makes the ladder feel steeper than ever before. The moment your boots touch the flow, you feel it. The ice beneath is not calm, not still, not stable, it hums. A faint, constant vibration courses through the surface, so subtle you might miss it if you weren't paying attention. But your body has become attuned to these signs. You recognize them instantly. Pressure is building, quietly, steadily, inevitably. Shackleton moves ahead, examining a ridge near the bow. It has grown overnight, its jagged crest rising nearly as tall as he is. Snow dusts its surface, but the underlying ice glows an eerie blue, revealing layer upon layer of crushed, ancient ice forced upward by unimaginable force. McElroy crouches beside a fissure. "Wider than yesterday," he says. "And deeper." Indeed, the crack yawns open like a frozen wound, its inner walls shimmering. A thin wisp of vapor curls upward from the gap, reminding you that beneath all this ice lies dark, freezing water. Worsley straightens, his expression grim. "We're inside a vice," he says. A slow one. A deliberate one. Shackleton doesn't respond immediately. He studies the horizon, then the ship, then the growing network of cracks that radiate outward like the lines of a shattered window pane. Finally, he speaks. We prepare for the next pressure wave. It will come. And as if the ice waits for his acknowledgement, a low rumble rolls from the east. The dogs begin barking. Their howls rise in uneven pitches, echoing off the snow ridges. Men turn sharply, instincts sharpened by weeks of pressure scares. The rumble grows, dot deepens, dot becomes a physical force beneath your boots. You brace yourself. A thunderous boom erupts beneath the floe. Snow jumps into the air. A massive ridge to starboard fractures along its base and rises violently, shedding chunks of ice that tumble down in glimmering cascades. Back to the ship, Shackleton commands. You run across the shifting floe, feeling the ice ripple beneath you. The ladder swings wildly as you grasp it. A wave of pressure pushes upward, tilting the entire world for a moment. As you scramble onto the deck, the worst sound of all shatters the air. A deep, massive crack, so loud it feels like thunder exploding against your chest, rips through the hull. Men freeze. The ship lurches sharply. Tools slide across the deck. A barrel rolls and crashes into the rail. Dogs howl, their cries echoing across the frozen plain. McNish bursts from below decks. Beam's giving way, he shouts. She's bending hard to starboard. Shackleton doesn't hesitate. Below. Now. You follow him. In the hold, the lanterns swing wildly, scattering chaotic shadows across the beams. The main support is bowed so far, now that it looks like a rib being forced inward. The fracture line has widened, its edges raw and pale. McNish raises his axe. We brace or she'll crack wide open. You work with frantic intensity. Hammers strike. Wedges drive in. Men shout instructions over the groaning of the ship. Sweat pours down your face despite the freezing air. Every blow you land feels like it might be the difference between holding and breaking. And all the while, the ice pushes harder. A violent shudder travels through the hull. A splintering crack snaps overhead. A beam shifts. Timbers scream. The ship is being crushed. Shackleton stays steady through it all, shouting orders with a voice that cuts through panic like a knife through rope. His presence holds the crew together, keeps fear at bay, convinces you that this nightmare can be managed. Finally, the pressure relents not by much. Not entirely, but enough the beam stops bowing. The hull ceases its violent shudder. The immediate danger passes. Men sag with exhaustion, breathing heavily in clouds of white mist. Some sit on crates, hands trembling from the effort. Others lean against the beams, listening to the ship's quieter, softer groans. Shackleton wipes frost from his beard. Good work, he says softly. We watch her through the night. You climb back to the deck to find the world sunk in a thick twilight. The sky is a deep, smoky gray. Snow falls steadily, blanketing the pressure ridges in soft white. But beneath that softness lies a world of violent forces that feels stronger each hour. Dinner is eaten in silence. The cook ladles thick stew into bowls with a weary rhythm. Men sit with hunched shoulders, legs braced against the tilt of the cabin floor. Every eye flicks upward at the sound of a creak. Every ear listens for cracks in the hull. A few attempt light conversation. Someone jokes about the ship wanting to lean just to see the world from a different angle. Another mutters that he'd prefer the hull upright. But the humor doesn't stick. Shackleton stands once more, his voice even and quiet. We rest in shifts tonight, and tomorrow we make decisions. He doesn't say it outright. He doesn't need to. The ship is failing, and all of you know it. Later, you step onto the deck for a moment of cold air before sleep. The night has darkened further, swallowing the horizon. The pressure ridges loom as vague, monstrous silhouettes. The wind moans softly. carrying fine snowflakes that sting your cheeks. The ship groans again long, low, defeated. You place a hand on the rail. The wood is trembling. You close your eyes and breathe. Deeply. Quietly. Bracing yourself for tomorrow. Because tomorrow, everything changes. The morning after the ship's final groans fades into memory. You wake on the ice, not to splintering wood, not to the tilt of decks beneath you, but to the sound of breathing men and the low, mournful wind passing over an endless white world. The canvas of your tent crackles with frost. Every breath you draw feels sharp, as though the air itself has hardened. Your body aches from the cold that seeped through the ground all night, climbing into your bones like a quiet tide. You're not on a ship anymore. You're on a drifting patch of frozen ocean. The knowledge settles heavily as you step out of the tent. The Endurance is no more. What remains of her lies crushed between slabs of ice masts, snout, hull shattered, timbers scattered like bones. Only a few dark shapes stick out of the snow now, already being claimed by the continent that trapped her. Men stand nearby, silent, their breaths rising in thin white ribbons. No one speaks of the ship. They simply look out at the horizon, adjusting to the still unbelievable truth. The thing that carried them across thousands of miles is gone. Shackleton moves between the tents, checking stores, speaking softly, lifting morale with a word here or there. His presence feels strangely warm in this frozen wasteland. He doesn't hide from reality, but he doesn't surrender to it either. We go forward, he says. Always forward. And so you do. Days blend into each other as you settle into the rhythm of life on the ice. The flow shifts beneath you at unpredictable times, rising and falling with distant pressure. Some nights you hear the cracks forming long, echoing snaps that slice through the dark like distant gunfire. Each sound reminds you how fragile your new home is. The ocean camp, as the men start calling it, becomes a strange little village of canvas tents, sledges, and overturned boats. Supplies are sorted and rationed with absolute precision. Dogs bark sharply in the cold, their breath rising in great plumes. The stove burns only briefly. Each day fuel is precious, and every drop must be guarded. Yet despite the hardship, there are moments of surprising calm. Men read from soaked books. They mend torn mittens. Some even joke, softly, carefully, as if the ice might listen. And always you watch the horizon, because it is moving. The entire flow drifts northward, carried by winds and currents. You feel it sometimes, a subtle, unsettling sense of motion beneath the stillness. Not forward or backward, not left or right, just away. Away from where the Endurance fell. Away from the pole. Away from any familiar shore. Shackleton studies the drift each day, measuring it, tracking it, knowing that rescue depends not on waiting, but on seizing the moment when the ice permits movement. We can't stay on the floe forever, he says one night. When it breaks, we'll be ready. And eventually, break it does. Not suddenly, not catastrophically, but with a slow, inevitable disintegration. Cracks appear more often around camp. Pressure ridges rise overnight. Tents must be moved constantly to avoid unstable sections. One night, you wake to the sound of a massive fissure ripping open just yards away. The ice splits into two jagged halves, water rushing up from below in dark swirling pools. Men leap from their beds, scrambling to pull stores back from the edge. The flow is dying. Slowly but surely Shackleton gathers everyone. We march to safer ice, he says, to a place we can launch the boats. You pack your gear, lash your sledge, take hold of the rope, and begin walking. The march across the pack ice is one of the hardest things you've ever done. Snow lies deep in some areas, forcing you to wade through drifts that swallow your knees. In other places, the ice is jagged, torn up by pressure, forming a labyrinth of peaks and valleys you must climb, descend, and climb again. The weight of the sledge strains your arms and shoulders. Cold burns your cheeks and stiffens your breath. Sometimes the ice seems solid, and then suddenly crack your boot plunges through a hidden gap, water splashing your leg with freezing shock. Men stumble, dogs bark. Sledges tip over. Progress slows to a crawl. The horizon never seems to move. But Shackleton is always at the front, pulling, lifting, encouraging, pushing forward with a determination that creates its own warmth. When the ice proves impassable for the day, he calls a halt. Tents go up. Snow blocks are cut to protect from wind. The stove hisses softly as a thin soup is made from meager rations. "You're still alive," Shackleton tells the men. That's enough. And somehow, it is. After days of marching, the ice becomes too broken to pull sledges. Deep channels snake through the floes, revealing dark Arctic water beneath. Pressure ridges rise like frozen fortresses. The men are exhausted. The dogs are thinner. Supplies grow lighter. Shackleton assesses the scene and gives the order. We launch the boats. You help drag one of the lifeboats, its sides battered, from the ship's crushing to the edge of a narrow lead of open water. The cold wind bites at your skin. Snow stings your eyes, but the boat slides forward, scraping across the ice until its keel touches water. Men climb in, legs shaking, breath trembling in the frozen air. You push off the ice with your boots and feel the boat sway beneath you. After months of stillness, the sensation of floating again is dizzying. You row. You steer. You brace yourself against waves that crash icy spray across your face. The boats, three in all, navigate through a maze of moving floes, each one threatening to crush the fragile hulls as the ice closes behind you. Nights are spent curled under canvas aboard the boats or hauled up on temporary floes that groan and tremble beneath your weight. But you keep moving. Always north. Always toward the Hope Sea. And after almost a week of rowing, navigating, freezing, starving, you see it. A low shape in the mist. A dark ridge rising above the water. A mass of rock and ice breaking the monotony of white and gray. Land! Crean shouts, his voice hoarse, cracking with emotion. Men lift their heads. Some laugh, some weep. Some simply stare, unable to believe their eyes. Elephant Island, a place no one has ever wanted to visit. A desolate, storm-lashed scrap of rock at the edge of the world. But to you, it looks like home. You row harder. Waves crash over the bow. Spray freezes on your beard, and lashes. Arms burn with exhaustion. But the shoreline grows clearer with each stroke. And when the keel finally scrapes against rock, men collapse onto their hands, sobbing into wet sand and pebbles. You fall to your knees too, feeling the solid ground beneath you. Not ice. Not shifting floe. Not cold water. With. Earth that will not crack beneath. You. Earth that will not swallow you whole. Shackleton steps onto the beach. He stands quietly for a moment, taking it in: the waves, the wind, the crags of rock jutting out like old teeth. Then he says softly, "We're saved." For now, not triumphant, not relieved. Just honest. Because Elephant Island is not rescue. It is only safety from the ice. And the true rescue lies hundreds of miles away across the wildest ocean on Earth. But you are alive. And every man is alive. Just as Shackleton promised. You pitch tents on the narrow gravel spit. You dry your soaked clothes by a feeble fire. The wind howls. The gulls cry overhead. Waves crash against the rocks. But you sleep. For the first time in months, you sleep on solid ground. You drift off with the taste of salt lingering in the air, the scent of damp rock beneath you, and the quiet certainty that although the journey is not over, you have reached a place where survival is possible. A place from which Shackleton will launch the boldest rescue attempt ever made. A place where hope takes root in frozen soil. Tomorrow, plans will begin. Tomorrow, the boss will choose a small crew. Tomorrow, the Janes Caird will be readied for the journey to South Georgia. But for tonight, you listen to the waves, feel the solid ground beneath you, and let your eyes close. You are safe.